Welcome to Storytime with Sugar. Today we're reading When You Take a Pig to a Party. This little girl is Adelaide, and the pig beside her is Sherman. Adelaide and Sherman do lots of things together. They swing on the tire swing hanging from the black oak tree. They slide down the hay pile in the barn, and they like a good game of horseshoes after supper. Adelaide has always said that Sherman is the dearest, sweetest, most wonderful, and best behaved pig in the world. So, of course, she thought it would be okay to take him to Ethan's birthday party, especially since she gave Sherman a bath, sprinkled some of her mother's best perfume on him, and tied her father's polka dot bow tie around his neck. Things did go just dandy at first. Sherman loved musical chairs and even one pinned the tail on the donkey. But then Adelaide got so carried away watching Marlin the magician that she forgot to keep an eye on Sherman. So before she knew it, Sherman was in the flower garden munching away. And when Ethan's daddy saw Sherman, he bellowed, "There's a pig in our peonies!" And Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children took off after Sherman, yelling, "Stop, Sherman, stop!" But Sherman, thinking that they wanted to play chase, started running in circles and bumped into Ethan's daddy, sending popcorn swirling like a January blizzard, which startled Sherman, who ran between Marlin the magician's legs, causing the rabbit just popping out of Marlin's hat to land kerplop on Sherman's back, which astonished Sherman so much that he scampered through a hole under the fence to where the McKinneys were having a barbecue. In fact, Sherman was running so fast he didn't even see the McKinney swimming pool until he landed kersplat right in it. And the McKinneys and all their guests roared, "There's a pig in the pool!" And Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children chased after Sherman, hollering, "Stop, Sherman, stop!" But Sherman didn't stop. Instead, he kerplashed across the pool, scrambled out, and squeezed through a loose plank into Mrs. Primrose's yard. And before Adelaide could get a word out, Sherman was heading through the open door into Mrs. Primrose's house, where she was hosting a bridge club luncheon. "Eek! There's a pig in my parlor!" shrieked Mrs. Primrose, whereupon Cassandra, Mrs. Primrose's cat, so dismayed to see a pig in her house, took a flying leap and landed kerplunk on Sherman's back. And Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children with muddy clothes and muddy feet tramped through Mrs. Primrose's parlor crying, "Stop, Sherman, stop!" But Sherman was already in the next yard where Mrs. Hayden was painting her flower boxes. And when Mr. Hayden stuck his head out of the window to see what the commotion was all about, he tipped a pot of geraniums into a bucket of paint, sending paint kersplatting over everything and everybody. Mrs. Hayden squealed, "There's a pig in our paint!" And Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children with muddy clothes and muddy feet and paint in their hair and on their best party clothes shouted, "Stop, Sherman, stop!" But Sherman simply would not stop. Instead, he darted across the street where Mr. Whipple was watering his lawn. And when Mr. Whipple turned in surprise, he sprayed water all over Mr. and Mrs. Rice, who were just coming home from the bakery. And that, of course, caused them to throw up their hands in despair, sending donuts kerplunking, kercrumbling all over the sidewalk. Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children scurried over Mr. Whipple's lawn, screaming, "Stop, Sherman, stop!" And finally, at long last, Sherman stopped. To eat the donuts, of course. But just as Adelaide was about to grab Sherman by his bow tie, Mr. and Mrs. Rice howled, "There's a pig in our pastry!" Which gave Sherman such a fright he took off again, heading straight for Lucy Marple, who was coming down the street on her brand new skateboard. "Help! There's a pig in my path!" Lucy hollered. Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children called out at the top of their lungs, "Jump, Lucy, jump off!" But when Lucy jumped off her skateboard, it did a backward flip and landed kerplump under Sherman's feet, which sent Sherman careening toward Ethan's yard, where Ethan's mother was putting the candles on the prettiest, yummiest, most delicious, most scrumptious-looking birthday cake you ever saw. And Adelaide and Ethan and all of the children wailed, "Oh, no, not the cake!" And they yelled and hollered and screamed and shrieked and cried and shouted and begged, "Stop, Sherman, please stop!" And kersmack, kerbash, kerboom, he did. So if you ask Adelaide, she'll tell you, you never know what will happen when you take a pig to a party, especially if his name is Sherman.